Welcome to That Annuity Show, the podcast that will make you an expert in explaining annuities to your clients. Give us 30 minutes each week and we'll shave hours from your client presentations. Now, here's your host, Paul Tyler.
Hi, this is Paul Tyler, and welcome to another episode of That Annuity Show. And with me today are my two co-hosts, Mark Fitzgerald. Mark, good morning.
Good morning, Paul. How are you?
Very well. Ramsey, how are you?
Awesome. Great to be here.
Okay, first of all, I got to check. You both voted today, correct? We're recording this on election day.
Voted 2 weeks ago.
Okay, good. Well, actually, the polling station is literally next door to my house. I can see it. The lines aren't too bad, but I already voted, so didn't even want to wait. So anyway, hey, listen. Today on election day, we have a very interesting guest, and just to kind of do a little bit of setup, we've talked a lot about agents and what it takes to actually, thrive and survive in a time like this, and Mark and I have both been personally, talking with some of our top producers on the phone. I've been doing this via chat online in my house at 10 and 11 o'clock at night. Mark, I actually got an agent at 6 a.m. from California today, believe it or not.
Wow.
Yeah. But I think, of course, Mark and Ramsey can jump in later, but it's, we see kind of two groups of agents, ones who have kind of like run to the cellar and they're waiting for this whole thing to pass, or the ones who said, hey, listen, I'm either doing something that's working or I'm willing to pivot and change. And the ones I've seen are ones who've they've got a real target market focus, they're using email, they're comfortable going on Zoom, but they're also doing more things just that they should have done before, sending cards, sending notes, picking up the phone and calling people. And one of those target markets, people should be thinking about is women. Most, statistics say most couples you do for retirement planning, there's a woman somehow, usually, not always, involved in the process. And have agents actually really taken the time to think and talk about how to communicate with them? And with us today is probably the perfect person, subject matter expert to do this. And I want to welcome Kathleen Burns Kingsbury. Kathleen is a wealth psychology expert, founder of KBK Wealth Connection, host of the Breaking Money Silence podcast, and author of several books, including How to Give Financial Advice to Women and How to Give Financial Advice to Couples. So Kathleen, welcome.
Thank you. I'm really excited to be here and have this conversation about one of my favorite topics.
Yeah, well, I guess I'll kind of give you the lead-off question, which is just tell us who are you, what do you do, and before we sort of jump in, tell us even pre-COVID, what was the benefit for focusing on women, and what have you been sort of promoting and telling advisors to do?
Sure. Well, in terms of what I do, I have, as you mentioned, a company called KBK Wealth Connection. And primarily what I do is I train and I coach and I educate financial advisors and related professionals, right? So pre-COVID, I was doing a lot of traveling, keynote presentations, breakouts, and then I've also done a lot of virtual training and consulting all along. My specialty happens to be in the psychology of women in wealth, couples dynamics, and family communication. So everything I do is from the lens of psychology and communication. And since COVID, I have had to pivot like the rest of us, and so have been very happy to continue to work with advisors and agents, but also have added some online resources for women entrepreneurs and business owners, and something called the Breaking Money Silence Learning Lab. So, I'm excited to talk today about the ongoing opportunity to better serve women and how pivoting, not only from my personal experience, but certainly the work that I do in the industry is so critical right now, not only for you and your business, but also for the clients you serve.
So on that particular topic, one of the things that's sort of interesting to me is that there's two potential opportunities with respect to better serving women from a financial advisory perspective. So one is to get more women in the profession, which is obviously a big plus, and then the other one is to help men. So those of us, right, figure out what is the best way to communicate and better understand, the needs of women in this space. So, can you tell us about the differences between those two objectives and how we should start thinking about it?
Sure. I mean, I think that's a great question. I don't think that you can separate the two. I think it's one of the same, which is we want equity in the financial services profession, and we want to be able to serve a variety of people, no matter how they identify in terms of their gender or their race, their culture, their sexual orientation. And so that is the bigger mission. And so when we drill down and really look specifically at women and women advisors and women clients, I think there are some key differences in terms of communication, in terms of what we may want from our advising experience or our careers. But what is really interesting is that when you actually really start to take a look, that a lot of what we are wanting as clients and we want as employees is starting to be very similar to what the next gender wants, what millennials want, no matter whether they're a man, a woman, or identified differently. And so I think in terms of the opportunity, many of you probably already know this, but women represent 51% population, that over the course of the next decade, women are going to inherit 70% of the intergenerational wealth assets that are being passed down. And right now, about 44% of women are breadwinners or the primary breadwinners in their homes. So we already have economic power. We just need to be able to figure out how to serve women better in this historically male field, which there's nothing wrong with that, but certainly it's well past time we should change. And in order to do that, I think we need to have professionals that can role model what it's like to be in the profession, and male allies like all of you to really cheer on the idea of equality. So I don't know if that answered your question, but those are my initial thoughts.
So, all right, so that's big picture. Like, in what sort of what are some of the biggest opportunities you see or mistakes you see advisors making in doing this? So imagine this was a coaching session and you were sort of trying to identify like the biggest opportunities first. Like, what would you focus on?
Well, I think the biggest opportunities are the ones that are already in your book of business. So often you will see, and I see this across the board. And by the way, I just want to say that women advisors make this mistake too. So this isn't just men. But what will happen is there'll be some assumption that the person in the meeting who's doing the most talking, or the person in the meeting that's the man who appears to be the one who is calling the shots, is the only one that you have to have a client relationship with. And so I would say the first step is to really look at who are you doing business with? And do you know, if it's a couple, do you know both members of that couple? And are you interacting and building that trust in that relationship with both? Because both are important. And so I talk a lot about working with couples and making sure that you aren't falling into some of the myths that I think have been perpetuated in this industry around women in finance. You know, one of the big ones, and this is an opportunity and a mistake. The mistake is, a big assumption is somehow women aren't that interested, or we defer all the decisions to men. And that isn't true. It's never been true, but it's never been less true than now. So really, I think if I was to coach someone, I would say, go through your book of business, look at the partners that you serve, and just start to develop a sheet of what do you know about, if it is a heterosexual relationship, what do you know about him? What do you know about her? And then build that relationship that's not as strong. And we can talk about different tactics for doing that. But at first, you just need to be aware of where you might be missing the boat. That's even before you start approaching new clients.
Yeah. So if I were to just take that the next step and say I had, I don't know, 1,000 clients that I've, done business with over the last, I've got my A list of my 100. Is step one to really just go through the list and say which of the female partners in the equation do I not know, and maybe just reach out to them directly?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think it's figuring that out, figuring out what you know, what you don't know. And here's the hard part. And this is why I'm glad you brought up like starting with your top clients. It's really developing a strategy that's very individualized. We are in a time period where relationship selling, it not only works for women, it works for all of our clients. And so developing some sort of way in which you can connect with that other person. Now, because we're in COVID, it may be checking in on the family and the family's health. It may be that you see an article, and unfortunately, there's a lot of these articles about how COVID is negatively impacting women more than it's negatively impacting men, and you share those statistics. It could be that you just realize that Johnny just ended, I don't know, a soccer season or is, dressed up for Halloween, and you just want to notice that as well. So it matters less what you're doing. What matters most is that you think about that individual particular person. So you make it very client centric and you take action. We can sit around and think, oh, I'm worried I'm not going to do it right. I'm not going to say the right thing. You can't get caught up in that, especially now. Because what has been proven time and time again with the people I work with is if you have these firm relationships with both partners, and especially the female partner, you are more likely to keep that client and do future business. And, if you didn't do that before COVID, definitely do it now, because that's where our industry is headed, no matter what aspect of finance you work in.
So Kathleen, I was also surprised on some of the statistics that that you had in one of your studies on the financial industry's challenge in advising couples. And 48% of clients admit to seeing the financial advisor without their spouse. And then agents and advisors also, 88% admitted to not sharing all the information with both spouses. What's behind that from your perspective?
So I think that's a great question, Mark. I think what's behind that is money silence. So in my 5th book, I talked about breaking money silence. And money silence is that taboo we feel against talking about money with ourselves, with our advisors, with our partners, with our family. Okay. And so if 48% of couples aren't meeting jointly with their advisor, which is a fidelity study, a couple years old now. And so if that is the case, why is that? Well, part of it is maybe the advisor isn't inviting both people to the meeting. Although in my experience, people usually invite and then quickly back up when a couple says no or comes up, with a reason why. The other reason is the couple's not seeing the value of coming in together, or there's some discomfort in their relationship and talking about money. And so that's where that second piece comes in, as to, not sharing things. We don't have a roadmap in our society about how to talk openly and honestly in our partnerships about money. So a lot of people struggle with that. And I see the advisor or the agent or anyone who's working around the numbers to be able to role model and educate clients and couples and say, no, this is really important. And the beauty of doing it with me is that I'm a third party. So, I can be objective. I'm not going to take sides, and it's important not to take sides. And I'm going to help you have this money conversation. And that type of extra effort, that type of, I'm going to help you talk about money as a couple, and I'm going to help you plan for your future, is something that not only women look for, I think really a lot of clients these days look for, someone who's going to take it that extra mile. So those statistics are concerning. I'm hoping that they're shifting and changing over time. And I think everybody who's listening can just chip away at it in terms of their own business and the couples that they serve.
It also seems the difficulty in terms of having that financial conversation even transcends down to the children and grandchildren. Statistically, some of the points that you had made as it relates to having those conversations being very challenging. Obviously, that poses generational wealth transfer issues as well. What are some of the fundamental issues behind having that conversation, not only with spouses, but with children?
I think that there's a couple of things on the advisor side. Let me start there. I think we talk about having these conversations, but we don't really train people in the profession how to do that, the tactics, the tools. So I'm working at doing that. I have other colleagues who are working at doing that. I think when it comes to the actual clients and the families, think about it, because I think COVID has brought this up to the forefront a lot. If you are the parent and all of a sudden your kid, your adult child, is concerned about your well-being or concerned that you're not going to have enough money to live if you live a long life, that there's already this dynamic, right? That you're the kid. I mean, all of us probably have parents. And when we go into our parents' house, we automatically are their kids, no matter what their age. And so to turn around and say, Mom and Dad, I'm concerned, I really think you should do this, which is a worthwhile conversation, it just becomes startling if families haven't been doing that all along. And so that reverse dynamic is something that takes a while to get over. What I encourage both advisors and people is to always lead with concern and to realize just because you want to have this conversation doesn't mean your kid wants to have it, doesn't mean your adult parent wants to have it. And so the best thing to do is to invite them to engage in a conversation about money, but then allow them to maybe have some time to decide when, where, or how. And it's a process. It's not a one-time conversation.
Kathleen, does it seem like the pandemic has created more opportunities for that because, the whole family's maybe under the same roof, or it's everybody's on Zoom and you're able to bring all parties together at once and sort of short circuit some of those disconnects?
Yes. And so one of the things I have been talking about in terms of breaking silence across generations is the idea that COVID is like this perfect storm, right, Paul? It's, unfortunately, it's a perfect storm. There's a global health crisis. There is, an unstable economy or just a lot of volatility. And then there's political and racial tension. So all of these things have us all amped up, right? And so that doesn't feel very good. But what it does is it provides us an opportunity because most of us, no matter what our economic situation is, we're concerned. We're stressed about money. We're stressed about the future. And if you have kids, often they're in the house with you now, which can be a blessing and a curse.
Yes, I can
so
attest.
Having a money conversation is like right there. The other thing that I think is really interesting, because I've worked in this field for a long time, is the resistance to being virtual, like even, being on Zoom like we are today. The resistance to that has gone away. And advisors have often thought, I don't want to do that. I don't want to embrace, it's not going to be the same thing. But what we have found is it's not only sometimes the same thing, it actually can be more intimate. And it can be a better opportunity. So my hope is when we get out of this pandemic, which we will, we get an opportunity to maybe use technology to engage families across generations in new ways, no matter where people live. So it's a long-winded answer to your question, Paul, but I believe very strongly that now is the time to break that money silence, and anybody in the industry can really help couples and families do that. And the next generation, Mark, to your point.
Great, thank you.
So you talked about Zoom and about remote virtual. Like we spent a lot of time talking about it here on the show, and we're all learning how to do it better, for sure. Are there some things that you've seen certain advisors do to get up that curve more quickly? Because it's hard. Part of it's technology, part of it's the way you communicate through this small lens. Like what are some of the things you've seen that have worked?
It is interesting, and I'm smiling because, as somebody who has a podcast and does these types of interviews, I've certainly had my own struggles as well. And so I think part of it is, first of all, taking the risk and letting go of the perfection, right? We have all been in meetings. I've been a presenter. You've probably been doing this podcast where the sound goes out, something's not working. And, I don't want to call it the old days, that makes me sound ancient, but in the past, if that happened, we'd be like, oh, we don't look professional. But the fact of the matter is we just look human. And what I'm talking about in terms of the financial services industry is relationship selling is showing that you are a human being. So if something messes up, don't be so hard on yourself. And actually, it can be an opportunity to really bond with your clients, because who hasn't had the experience of something going wrong technology-wise? The computer dies right before the big presentation. So I think it's being approachable, being authentic, certainly getting a little training or a little practice in this arena, but also being kind to yourself. We all are just trying to get through. And even when you look at late night show hosts, right? You've seen how people like Jimmy Fallon or Jimmy Kimmel or Seth Meyers are trying to figure it out. So we're all in it together.
I like that observation, and that relationship selling is showing you're a human being. That's the tagline for the show.
Excellent. I love that. It's true, and I'm a recovered perfectionist. So, I used to really beat myself up, and then I realized ultimately, if you learn from each of these times and your clients learn too, that I actually talk with advisors about how to repair relationships and actually foster trust through some of these gaffes that actually can ultimately be beneficial for the relationship. I feel like Mark and Paul had a question. I don't know. I got us going on the Zoom thing.
Mark.
Yeah, thank you. So I guess as we kind of had first kind of embarked in the COVID phenomenon here back in March, I guess, you had done a presentation about 3 stress management tips for advisors. And obviously we're seeing an uptick again. Is there anything you can share with them in terms of how to manage through this stress?
Yes. And thank you for doing your research. I was going to tease you, but now I'm just impressed that you knew that I did that. So one of the things that we talked about was certainly managing your stress in terms of turning it off. One of the things that is hard about working from home, right, is you are on all the time if you let yourself. So I think advisors need to set hours, and they need to stick with those hours. And ultimately, those boundaries are helpful for you and for your clients. The next thing you need to do is figure out what helps you with stress management. Is it taking a walk? Is it laughing with your kids? Is it reading a book? Is it locking yourself in the bathroom and not talking to anybody who's in the house? Whatever it is, we need to really be conscious and book that in, because that is so important. And I think the third thing is really getting support, whether that's coaching through folks like yourself or myself, whether that is talking to a study group, or just having somebody that's in your professional life who understands the stressors of not only being an advisor, but being an advisor at a time where there is, this unprecedented situation. So those are the 3 things that I'd offer today. Maybe slightly different than what I said on April 1st, but the gist will be the same.
Great. Thank you very much.
No, obviously, if I'm want to have better relationships with my women's clients, some things will, that were work pre-pandemic will work after pandemic. But sort of digital age, over the next 6 months, Kathleen, if I'm trying to get in touch points, I think sending out information, to the couple that is focused more on the woman, I think is a tremendous idea. We've experimented with video courses, on using Pinterest, visual mediums that are more used by women to build a retirement vision that they can share with people. We've developed a number of sort of online materials that complement some of the printed material we have. So general discussion guides for retirement. If you were trying to say, what material, today digitally would work best with women, given the stresses that women are under this time. And I would include hours that I'm available. Should I gear more towards morning? Should I be, really think about working from 12 to 8 or 9 at night? What does this soup look like right now?
Sure. I think the first piece of that, and I am going to answer your question, is anybody who's listening has to think about who are the women they serve. Because if women are 51% of the population, then you need to think about what's my segment, what's my ideal female client, or who am I currently working with if you don't have an ideal female client, and then really tailoring your answers to that. So I'll give you a couple examples. So if you are working with, say, a woman business owner who's trying to pivot during this time, one of the things I would say is if you send her any information, keep it short, keep it brief, save her time. If you want to talk to a woman business owner, chances are you want to get her in the morning before her day takes off, before she has to deal with the kids, if she indeed does have a family, and all her staff. If you are dealing with somebody who is maybe a stay-at-home mom who has small kids, think about when are those kids most likely to be either physically in school or remotely on school, and then connect with her at times that she might have a break for herself. And in terms of, just thinking about even like millennial women, and thinking about millennial women who are professionals, If they are very tech savvy, then you're going to want to do things like send them PDFs. Or if they're really into saving the environment, which is never a bad thing, then you want to make sure you're not sending them paper, you're doing the digital things. So it always starts with, who do I serve? What does that female client look like? And within that niche, what's going to work best for her? And if you don't know, here's a great time, and you can do this digitally, do a quick survey, SurveyMonkey or one of the other ones, and ask your clients, when's the best time to contact you? What are the hours that work? And what type of information are you interested from? Because the beauty in general of women is, when asked, and we like to be asked, we will tell you what we think. And then all you have to do is listen. Does that help, Paul? Does that give you enough time?
That's a great idea. No, Mark, you and I've got to talk. So I've already got a couple ideas here.
Right.
They're coming from this.
Happy to help.
Kathleen, an extremely high percentage of women change or seek new financial advisors after their husband passes away. Is there anything specific that they're looking for, or any type of an advisor that positions themselves well to kind of accommodate from that perspective?
Yeah, the statistic you're talking about has been around for a long time. It's 70% of women fire their couples advisor within 1 year of the death of their spouse. And so I think the part that is in the advisor's control is, again, that relationship, developing the relationship. Often women will fire their couples advisor if they've never met the advisor, if they don't feel connected to the advisor, if they don't feel heard. And so part of it is just inviting people to joint meetings and doing the things that we're talking about now, developing that relationship, whether it's in the meeting or whether you're developing the relationship outside the meeting. You need to be somebody that she knows and somebody that she trusts. So that's the first piece. I think the second piece goes back to your ideal female client. Think about who that person is, and then learn about her experience. So her collective experience and her individual experience. So if you work a lot with women entrepreneurs, start to look at how women entrepreneurs view risk. There are research studies out there. There are books out there that you can read. You can interview people. You need to be able to put yourself in your client's headspace and understand them a little bit more. And so I think it's a combination of those things, but ultimately it gets down to, it's really easy to fire someone you don't know. So you just want to take that off the table. The other thing is that this is also an opportunity. If 70% of women are firing, advisors, then they're going somewhere. So it's a real opportunity to prospect and to get real clear as to what your value add is and how you can communicate your value to a woman and her family. And there are some people doing really great work out there, but certainly not enough. So there's room in the space for a little healthy competition.
Without a doubt. Thank you.
Yeah, well, listen, we're close to the top of the time. Ramsey, Mark, any final questions or thoughts you'd like to share here?
So I just wanted to say that, look, I think that the opportunity that we've discussed with respect to women as clients and as advisors both is something we need to stay focused on. It's super important. In addition to, differences in longevity, something that I heard in a recent podcast is that frankly, that there's an increase in the divorce rate in the 50s and 60s in that age range for a variety of reasons. But it's similar to the situation when there's a passing. It's quite probable that if somebody's leaving their spouse, they might also leave their financial advisors as well. So it is,
especially if it reminds you of your spouse.
Exactly. So it's really it's just an interesting thing because it's just a rational, right? It's the rational thing to do. It's the rational thing to do to build a long-term sustainable business. So very fascinated by your work and thank you for joining us today.
Oh, thank you. It's always fun. I mean, we just scratched the surface, but it's certainly a great conversation to have and a huge opportunity for anybody interested in better serving a variety of types of women and their families.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Kathleen. It was a pleasure speaking with you today. I really appreciate you coming on the show.
Hey, Kathleen, hey, thanks so much. And of course, I got like a vacuum cleaner running next room.
Authenticity.
Of course. Of course. But yeah, tell us if agents or, we do have a number of people from other carriers and insurance distributors, I'm sure, are looking for advice for their agents, how do people best find you and or listen to your shows?
Sure. I think the best thing to do is to go to my website, breakingmoneysilence.com. There's actually an advisor gifting program that I just launched. So if you want to connect with your women clients and you think they might be interested in learning more about the psychology of negotiating, you can just go to advisorgifting.breakingmoneysilence.com and check that out. And I'm on all the social media, and I'm not, as you've probably picked up on, a very quiet person. So it's easy to ping me and have me chat with you back. So definitely reach out if you have questions or comments or want to know more.
Hey, great, thanks. And we'll put those links in our show notes when this episode comes out at the end of this week. But again, thank you, Kathleen. Mark Ramsey, thanks for joining us. And for the listeners, thanks so much for joining us. Be sure to go to our website, That Annuity Show. We've got an email sign up so you can actually get alerts when these great episodes like this come up. Tell your friends, and listen, if you'll all have voted by the time we get through, and but thanks again for listening and all the contributions you made to this business.
Thanks for listening. If you've enjoyed the show, please rate and recommend us on iTunes, Stitcher, Overcast, or wherever you get your podcasts. You can also get more information at thatannuityshow.com.